Escalating conversations to offers. How do you take someone that may be interested and bring them to getting an offer? How do you stop those that are not going to make offers earlier in the process? And how do you accelerate those that are going to make offers? Most importantly, how do you tell the difference? We're going to talk about 5 steps in an escalation process of a conversation today that we utilize in all of our discussions to separate the wheat from the chaff, figure out who's going to be the best counterparties in any of our engagements. So the first step is just a simple dialogue. I like to reach out to people, as we've discussed in prior videos, and say, hi, we're representing a company doing a thing looking to accomplish this objective. We think you may be the good counterparty to do so because of reasons X, Y, Z. What do you think? And oftentimes, it's just that kind of initial dialogue, and whether that's via email, text, phone call, carrier pigeon, that someone says, look, this isn't going to be for us, or hey, this could be interesting. And we pry a little bit more and say, why do you think it's interesting? And have you done things in this space? Do you have the capabilities? Or how are you guys capitalized? Things of that nature. But that's that initial dialogue, just the initial kind of sniff test. And that goes a long way to saving time, because you could send an email and wait a month, or trade 3 different 4-word emails. Just have a conversation. Just see how it feels. Does it make sense to get to the next step? Step number 2 is follow-up questions. So anyone that's interested in something enough, particularly the acquisition of the business or providing of capital, a pretty substantial allocation of time and capital, is going to have questions. So after the initial dialogue, after some of the information's been reviewed, we say, hey, send us some follow-up questions. You've already seen kind of the preliminary data and information. What other questions do you have? And usually this will be the next level of separation. So some parties will say, you know what, it was kind of interesting, but not interesting enough to get further. And others will say, here are all of our questions. And some will say, here are all of our questions, of even more so. But point being is, it does serve the purpose of separating things. Moving to the next step, which is either a fuller dialogue or an indication of interest. And so this is another conversation saying, okay, we've had our initial discussions, you've seen the preliminary information, we've gotten you some additional information. What are you thinking about the deal? What are you thinking about the capital? If you were to move forward, what do you think the probability is that A, you will move forward, and B, what does the structure look like? What does the value look like? Start asking the prodding questions. Start getting into the actual nitty-gritty, the details, some of the metrics, some of the actual structural components. And if the answer is, I don't know, maybe this works, or just directionally, or just very high level, it's probably not going to be it, right? If you were selling a house and you said, hey, what do you think the value of the house would be, or what's the price per square foot of the building you're looking to buy? It's the same thing with businesses, in the sense of saying, what do you think the business is worth? How would you value it? What would you go over on financing? If someone doesn't have a specific answer to it, they're probably not that interested. Better to just kind of say, okay, look, this may not move forward. So further dialogue or an indication of interest. And indications of interest to us are not letters of intent. They're not formally written documents, but they're just communications, whether verbally or written, saying, hey, we would value it at X, this is how we would structure it, this is what we think for the transition period, etc. We give guidance in that regard. But after the follow-up questions and the follow-up information is provided, that ping-pong ball goes across the table again, and we say, look, give us an indication of interest, let's have a discussion or a further dialogue relative to the actual numbers and the actual structure or skeleton of what a deal might be. Step number 4 then are meetings with the team. And so oftentimes, if we're representing a company looking to sell itself or find capital, first time they're going to have a dialogue with the owners or executives of the business is going to be at this point in time. And so at this point, we're able to go back to the owners or executives and say, hey, look, these parties are bona fide interest, we've vetted them, and there's some structural considerations relative or skeleton framework for what an offer might look like. We think it's interesting enough to have a chat with them. And then we bring in and connect the 2 parties. And that's where there's more questions that can get into more nuanced operational elements, more about projections, more about trajectory, more about strategic catalysts for the business. And it's that dialogue. And you know that if someone shows up to have a 1-hour Zoom meeting with someone, the fact that they show up shows a level of interest, because these are thoughtful conversations, and no one wants to show up and just kind of mumble their way through these things. And then secondly, during the actual conversation, you're able to glean things as well. Are the questions thoughtful? Are they nuanced? Are these things you would ask if you wanted to buy a company, provide capital, or is it something that's just kind of kicking a can? And candidly, we're only dealing with professionals in this business anyways, in the sense that we've already vetted out anybody who's we would deem a tire kicker or a party that's not going to be capable of doing the transaction up to this point. And so this is just another kind of further layer of commitment. And after this, we want a formal letter of intent. On company letterhead, how would you value the business? What would the structure look like? What would the process look like? What would the transition for ownership and the executives look like? What would happen to the stakeholders, employees, etc.? And so to recap, the 5 steps, the 5 key elements of escalating a process from an interested party to an offer are dialogue, follow-up questions, A fuller dialogue or indication of interest, meeting with the team, letters of intent. Walk someone through those 5 steps, and it's almost impossible for those that are remaining not to be very serious and very interested in the opportunity. If you wait too long throughout the process without these points of, hey, we need you to do this, hey, asking for this, you're just not going to get the separation. You're not going to shake the tree, and you're going to end up with more people that perhaps looks good and that there's a lot of interested parties, but no real gauge as to the veracity of their interest and how many real offers you're going to get. Better to have a handful of very good offers at the end of a process than 25 people that say, you know what, I just don't think it's going to be for us. So that's the thought. Escalating conversations from discussions to offers to 5 steps. Hope the week's off to a good start for everyone. Keep pushing forward. God bless. See everyone next time.